BNC, 100% black and brown host all day. Finally, news that speaks to us.
Congressman Colin Allred says Brittney Griner has been in touch with her Russian lawyer. The congressman says the lawyer has been in touch with her agent and her family back at home, and they have been told that she is okay for now. Joining me now with the very latest on this is historian and Russian expert Kimberly St. Julian-Varnon. She's a PhD candidate at the University of Pennsylvania, and her writing analyzes race, foreign policy, and culture in Russia. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us. WNBA star Brittney Griner has now been detained in Russia for nearly a month. What can you tell us about the latest in her case?
I think the key thing about Brittney Griner's case is it has been 3 weeks and we haven't heard much about her case. And so I've seen on social media and across other medias that people are saying if this is, was Tom Brady, it would be a completely different situation. Everyone would be up in arms. And I think the key thing to remember is we are up in arms. The Black community in the United States is up in arms. But the situation is very different now than it was a month ago. And we are Russia is at war with Ukraine. And so Brittney's position is significantly different than the other two Americans mentioned earlier, Trevor Reed and Paul Whelan, who were arrested in 2019 and in 2018, respectively. So Brittney's case requires a bit more care, but also it's going to need to be a little bit more under the radar for diplomacy to really work on pushing Russia to release her and the other two Americans.
Help us understand more about how it is different than the other two cases of those other two Americans detained.
So the key is Brittney Griner is famous in the United States, but not just in the United States. She was on her way to Russia to play basketball, which she has done for the past almost 8 years. She is a known name in Russia. And so I think one of the key things that makes her case different is that unlike Trevor Reed and Paul Whelan, who are ex-Marines, but also who are portrayed in Russian media as foreigners, as spies, they can't do that with Brittney Griner. She has won European basketball championships for Russia. And so I think those are things that actually work in her favor, is that she is known in Russia and she has that, that status both in the United States and in Russia. And she has been an ambassador for the WNBA playing abroad and along with many of her teammates for the past, few years. So I think these are all good for her. And I think it's also one of the reasons why Russian state media hasn't mentioned her name that often. They've said they have an American basketball player in custody, but they haven't been saying her name that often because I think she is known in Russia. So I think these are things that make her case a little bit better than that of Trevor Reed and Paul Whelan, is that she is known across the ocean in both countries.
And what about those who question the fact that she has been in Russia, over the years and was carrying that substance, the cannabis oil? Not sure exactly the details of what it is. What about those who are saying, why did she have that and should she have known? Not justifying that she's in jail for that, but what about her carrying that substance to Russia?
I think the key issue for me is that requires you to believe what the Russian state says. And I'm not there yet, especially with a high profile star like this. But it's also key to remember that the laws about vapes and it was vape cartridges are in flux in the United States, and they're incredibly in flux in Russia. And they change quite a bit. So just between her playing basketball in Russia 2 years ago versus now, you can see a change in the law. But also, even if she wasn't aware of these laws, this is still a case of completely overcharging. And instead of having what we would call a misdemeanor possession, she's being charged with an incredibly, what would be a felony in the United States, of large scale, drug transportation. And that's utterly ridiculous. So I think we have to be very careful with how we what we take from the Russian state media and what we take from the Russian government about this case, because it really just serves to inflame the situation, but also make Brittney look like, she isn't a victim of Russian state aggression.
Do we know anything about her conditions? There's been a mugshot that was released a couple weeks ago. Has there been any other update on the conditions that she's facing in Russia right now?
From what I understand, there hasn't been a lot of information released, but this is also could be because of the Russian state. They're also having to manage a full-scale war in Ukraine, but also they understand, because of the American outpouring of outrage and support for Brittney Griner, that they may have made a critical misstep. So I don't think or believe that she's being mistreated because she's worth entirely too much. She's entirely too valuable to Russia for that to happen. And she's in pre-trial detention. She hasn't been convicted. She isn't in prison like Paul Whelan and Trevor Reed, who have been convicted and are in Russian prisons across Russia. So her case is a bit different. But I do, trust her team and I trust her wife when they're honest and say, that she's doing okay, but they're also trying to maintain privacy and really protect Brittney. So I'll trust them. But I do know if anything happens to her, the alarm will be raised in the United States, and Russia will not be able to get away with it.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Black experience in Russia, especially for women, and how this case is related? What are the circumstances that we're dealing with here in Russia?
Being a Black woman in Russia, it's very hard. And so when you think about how race functions in Russia, it is very much gendered. So Brittney is not only a Black woman, she is a Black gay woman, and she's over six, like, I think she's 6'8". So she's a very visible minority, but also her being a gay woman also puts her at risk because Russia has such strict anti-LGBTQ laws and actively oppresses gay people, but also people of African descent. They are targeted by police for bribes. They're often beat up. And so for African women and for Black women, you have not only the threat of abuse in terms of, police harassing you, but you also have the fear of sexual harassment and sexual assault. So being a Black woman in Russia is often, puts women in peril. But because Brittney is also 6'8" and she's in custody and she's such a high profile American, I would hope that means she is shielded from some of these worst aspects of being a Black woman in Russia. But it's very difficult being a Black woman in Russia. And there have been recently, 2 years ago, an Afro-Russian woman was talking about the various hardships she faced being a Black Russian woman, and the Russian government opened up a criminal investigation of her because she was talking about this on Instagram. So there's a lot of layers to this situation, but race and gender are definitely tied together for Brittney's case in Russia right now.
Okay, you're constantly schooling me because the last time I talked to you, you talked about the Afro-Ukrainian experience, which most of us didn't know about. Now you're talking to me about the Afro-Russian experience. That's a whole other conversation. So thank you for enlightening us on that and helping us understand this whole situation. As always, appreciate you joining us here on BNC. Thanks so much.